Dit is Woensdag, die 21ste Februarie. Verskoning oor die video's wat laat op YouTube verskyn. Dit is maar die wifi wat probleme gee. So ek hoop en vertrou dat dit nou vanaand nie weer 'n probleem sal wees nie, maar dankie vir jou geduld. Ons gaan aan met Destiny. Another plane with members of the Department of External Affairs would fly directly from Pretoria and meet the prisoner plane from Windhoek at Maun in Botswana. There they would wait until confirmation had been received that Lieutenant Roberts was on board the Angolan plane and had departed from Luanda. At the same time, an Angolan official will inform the SWAPO High Command that the prisoner was at Maun Airport ready for the exchange. According to the well-established plan, the Maun team would then commence to Kasane from where the exchange would be effected. Harrison was elated that it would be his responsibility to accompany the safeguard, or rather to accompany and safeguard the prisoner all the way to freedom. And this way, he felt sure he maintained control over General Bomba until the last moment, secured in the knowledge that he was the only one who knew the whereabouts of the diamonds. All that would remain was for him to go and fetch it. Lieutenant Kark, Harrison said as soon as Jeremy returned. We need to use our own King Air to transport General Bomba to Maun. Jeremy nodded. It made sense. The twin turboprop Beechcraft King Air was based at Eros Airport and was registered to a civilian company at Lanseria near Johannesburg. But it belonged to military intelligence under supervision of Brigadier Harrison Pote. I want you to select 2 pilots from our pool, preferably ex-Rhodesians with combat experience, pilots that I can trust completely. You and Major Connolly will fly with us, he continued. Once we have dropped the general off at Kasane, we shall fly to Kasinga as planned. I don't want the general to have a change of heart once he is free. Harrison was not a man to take anything at face value. Before he concluded the deal with General Bomba, he had sent 2 of his most trusted Angolan informants to Kasinga to check his half of the map. Soon afterwards, they had reported back to Major Connolly that they had found the unerupted and trusted remains of the larder under the baobab tree, abandoned there as evidence of the brutal attack by the South Africans 6 years previously. And once Bomba handed him the second part of the map, they would whisk in and fetch the precious cargo from where it was buried on the morning of 4 May 1978. 7 a.m. north of Table Bay. The sea was mirror flat with an occasional swell that passed almost unnoticed. It was a windless morning, one of those few real calm mornings along the west coast with just a faint trace of mist along the shore. Slowly proceed to 30 knots, the captain said through his bushy red beard, a broad smile on his face. Let her run. A slight tremble became noticeable as the strikecraft's bow lifted under the force of the huge twin diesel's propellers. On the open bridge of the SAS Frans Erasmus, the captain turned around, staring with excitement at the wake behind the fast attack craft as it accelerated to 30 knots. Lifting his eyes above the straight line of the wake, he saw the sister ship, the SAS Jim Fouchier, following suit. The sharp bow split the calm blue waters, throwing a white shower of bow waves to the sides. Both ships carried their full assortment of armaments, 6 surface-to-surface missiles and 1 76mm rapid-firing cannon. The stern cannons on both ships had been removed during the night at Simonstown Naval Dockyard and replaced with 2 empty launches for the 18-feet Barracuda MKI boats, 2 per ship, 4 boats in total. For the Rackies. Commander Rustus Hickman laughed at the pure pleasure of the ship's speed, staring over the sea, just able to notice the faint protrusion of Dawson Island in the distance. 2 degrees to port side, he commanded, and felt the immediate response as the coxswain brought the ship on track. Looking astern, he saw with satisfaction that Commander Dave Kellerman had followed suit. He also noticed that the SAS Jim Fisher had decreased the distance between the 2 ships. First Lieutenant, he rumbled, it looks like they want to play. Proceed to 35 knots. With the wind ruffling his beard and hair, the 2 ships sped across the ocean, and it was only once they were about to enter Saldanha Bay that he ordered the ship down to 15 knots. 20 minutes later, they came alongside the well-constructed pier at Donkergat, the operational base of 4 Reconnaissance Regiment. The 2 ships had left Salisbury Island in Durban 2 days earlier. They encountered heavy seas on their voyage south, but both captains understood the urgency of the mission and pushed their crews and ships to the maximum. The delay at Simonstown was understandable as the ships had to be prepped for the trip north. The crews were unaware of the nature of their mission, but both captains were fully briefed and informed about the rescue mission of Lieutenant Roberts. As soon as both ships were secured alongside the jetty, Rustus and Dave were met by Tom McLachlan, who led them up the footpath to the operations room. The base was abnormally quiet as they walked down the long hallway to the operations room at the far end. They encountered no one except for voices from the signals room, which door stood ajar. Tom stopped briefly at the office of the officer commanding, who greeted the 2 naval officers with a firm and friendly handshake. We expected you only later today, said Colonel Josh van der Berg, as they continued to the ops room. Fair winds and a flat sea, commented Dave. We opened up as soon as we came around Hout Bay. Let the dogs loose and win some time. I am glad. We shall need every minute from here on. We have no idea what the weather will do over the next couple of days. They entered the operations room, where they were met by 2 lieutenants, both wearing the insignia of medical doctors. Dr. Dean Maritz, a qualified operator from 7 Medical Division, and Lieutenant Jesse Stein. Josh introduced them. We thought it important to have Lieutenant Stein aboard to take care of Lieutenant Roberts once she came aboard. She is taking a whole bag of clothes and women things that might be needed. Dean will deploy with the team, and Jessie will stay aboard the ship. She can take over once our subject is aboard. Rustus held out his hand. You are welcome, Jessie. We have prepared space, if you can call it space, for you and Lieutenant Roberts on board my ship. Lieutenant Maritz, however, will travel aboard the Jim Fisher in the company of Dave. I always draw the short stick, said Dave with a rueful grin. Seats, please. Josh indicated a few chairs in front of a large map and aerial photograph. They all knew that it was the target area. Tom, you may continue. You are, after all, the mission commander. Colonel, commanders, Tom began. We all know the background to this operation. Lieutenant Roberts was abducted by SWAPO in an effort to effect an exchange of prisoners specifically for General Bomba, a senior plan general who had been taken prisoner during the Kasinga raid in 1978. He paused momentarily. Due to public demand and political pressure, the government has agreed to the exchange, but only on the surface. The state president feels that this might create similar abductions if we allow General Bomba to go free. Therefore, he has ordered us to free Lieutenant Roberts at the earliest possible moment. If we do not succeed, then the exchange will go ahead as planned. Again, Tom paused before continuing. Our first problem was to ascertain where she was being kept and if an extraction from the sea was indeed possible. I have learned her position only 4 days ago, which leaves us with less than a week to get her out. And that includes today, and that is why we shall depart as soon as all the equipment is on board. The loading process is ongoing as we speak. Our target is the Kwanza base of SWAPO, situated roughly 8 kilometers upstream from the mouth of the Kwanza River. We have to cross underneath the Kwanza Bridge, which is heavily guarded according to our own previous reconnaissance of the bridge. Tom used his pointer to demonstrate on the aerial photograph. We need to execute the operation over 2 nights. During the first, I have to meet up with the UNITA rebel who have searched and found her. Then, depending on his information, we shall decide our timing schedules and exact plan for the final extraction the second night. Of course, the UNITA will lead us to the target. The commanders listened with individual attention. It was clear to them that there were few options and that everything must work the first time. There would be no time for returns. We shall use our Barracudas, of which 2 will serve as gunships with .50 Brownings mounted on the decks. The other 2 will carry the attack team of 8 operators, including myself and the doctor. Tom nodded at Dean Maritz, who had been exercising with them during the past 2 days. Of course, each Barracuda will carry its normal 3-man crew as well. The gunship Barracudas will stay on the seaward side of the Kwanza Bridge to provide support should the attack team draw heavy fire from the bridge, especially on our way back. Colonel Josh van der Berg cleared his throat thoughtfully. Of course, we shall airlift the girl and the team from Rocky Point as soon as the strike crafts are within reach. We shall evacuate and the team from Rocky Point to Ondangwa and the girl from there to Pretoria. Security and cover plan? Asked Roosters, combing through his red beard with his fingers. This operation is limited to us. Only the state president, General Oxtirand, and those assembled here know about the rescue mission. As far as the rest is concerned, the exchange is happening. And that is one of the reasons why the exchange has been set for 5 o'clock in the afternoon, to give us time to get away and confirm whether or not we were successful. As far as the cover story for the rest is concerned, we are inducting training exercises with the strike crafts flotilla just west of Cape Columbine, said Colonel van der Berg. No report lines, absolute radio silence until after the operation. We'll brief the crews once we are on the open sea. Andy added to his thoughts. With some luck, we can push it tonight and tomorrow. Thereafter, the weather might deteriorate. An hour later, the strike crafts were heading towards the open sea, and on the stern of each ship were 2 Barracuda Mk1 boats. The recce's were on their way. Chapter 12. Kwanza River Mouth. Johnny, cousin of Savimbi, the great cockerel, was getting worried. For 3 weeks now he had made his fires, one at the land edge shadowed from the land side by low shrubs, the second on the sandbank stretching in the sea at the river mouth, and still there was no sign of Tango Mike. It has been 2 months since he had dispatched the messenger, but bearing in mind the many obstacles the youngster would face along his way, it was understandable. Still, according to Johnny's estimates, the message should have been delivered by now. If not, the messenger was either captured or killed. Then Tango Mike would not come. He would be waiting in vain. His own situation was becoming a risk. He knew he was blending in well, but knew it could not last. Sooner or later, questions will be asked, and he had been seen. And again he went over the timetable in his head and realized that he could perhaps stay another week, but then he would have to disappear, working his way back to the UNITA lines. The great Cockerel would not be happy if he didn't succeed in the task, but for him to succeed, to bring the task to fruition, he needed Tango Mike and his men, the same men who had saved his life with the fortunate intervention in the kraal of Roberto. 5 more nights, he thought, and that's it. Then he had to leave. Something was watching him, or someone. He just felt it and looked around quickly. He saw nothing. He listened. Cocking his head to one side, only the rushing water and the sound of the waves where the current met the sea. He was getting jumpy. He returned his gaze to the coals. The hand touched his shoulder, and Johnny yelped with fright. "It's me," the voice said quietly in English. "Tango Mike." And Johnny sat stunned. No one had ever crept up on him so unexpectedly, and never had he thought that a white man could be able to do it. He turned his head slowly and could see nothing until Tom smiled and he noticed the white of his teeth. The fire had burned down to a few coals, throwing almost no shadows on Tom, and Tom knelt in the sand beside him. His camouflaged uniform clung to his body, wet from the swimming. His face was black with camouflage cream. "You're coming with me," he told Johnny. "We can talk on the ship and do our final preparation there." "I am ready," replied the UNITA, still stunned with Tango Mike's sudden appearance, but greatly relieved. "I will go with you all the way back to Rundu." "Yes, but first we must rescue the girl. Then I shall take you to Rundu. Get your stuff. Let's go." Johnny scooped up a small bundle with his earthly belongings. At the water's edge, he stopped dead. "Where is the boat? Come, the boat is out there. I'll swim it to you." "I can't swim." Johnny's voice showed panic. "I will drown." "No, you won't. Just hang on to me. It's only a short distance. Vamos." Tom slung his AKM in front of his chest and pulled on his flippers. Still, Johnny hesitated, and Tom grabbed him by the waist belt and pulled him into the water. Johnny splashed on his face, almost choked, and frantically grabbed Tom. "My arm," Tom whispered. "Hang on to my arm." But Johnny kept on struggling and fighting as Tom swam with strong, powerful kicks through the few first waves. Once there was no more water breaking over his head, he relaxed. And then they were at the Barracuda. Eager hands grabbed Johnny from his grip, lifted him boldly into the boat. "Okay, let's go," Tom said as soon as he was aboard and seated astride one of the 2 benches. On the other side, Snakes Basson was helping Johnny on the bench and showed him how to sit. Johnny, however, clung with both arms around the bench, and Snakes let him be. The barracuda idled back into deeper water away from the coast, the noise of the twin 85 HP Yamaha engines almost inaudible under the canvas muffler. The boat commander searched through the pair of night vision goggles, detecting the second boat, and directed the coxswain towards it. Only 2 boats were launched. The one that carried Tom to his rendezvous with Johnny, the UNITA, and one other with a mounted .50 Browning on the deck, just for an emergency. It was not standard practice to deploy a gunboat, but for the upcoming operation, Tom thought it both necessary and convenient, especially if they ran into trouble while navigating the river. As soon as the 2 barracudas joined up, Sergeant Snakes gave the signal and the 2 boats sped away towards open waters for the rendezvous with the strike crafts. Tom didn't see it, but he knew that Snakes was watching the built-in compass closely, keeping them on course to the ships. The sea was still relatively calm and their progress was good. As they neared the strike crafts, he saw the gunboat peeling off and heading for the rear ship, which could be the SAS Jim Fouchier, while Snakes swam them in behind the SAS Franz Erasmus, who was cruising at 8 knots, the recovery speed. They had launched 1 boat from each ship, and because they were not heavily laden, they did not bother to go alongside and sent the extra hands up the scrambling nets to the deck. Tom watched the drill closely, not interfering at all. The launch had been extended over the rear of the ship and dipped towards the water. He noticed the speck of light in the water near the barracuda's bow. A glow stick attached to an orange buoy marked the position of the cable, and the number 3 crew member leaned far over with the boat hook in hand and hooked the cable. Removing the buoy from the cable, he hung over the bow and attached the cable to the bow ring. The coxswain immediately eased the power on the Yamaha and the cable became taut. The number 1 disengaged the Yamahas but kept them idling. If something should go wrong, they would need power immediately. Snakes broke out another glow stick and signaled the crew on the ship. The winch started rolling and slowly the barracuda was pulled forward until it started rolling up the launch. Only then the engines were cut. Lastly, the hydraulics pulled the launch ramp back over the stern. Tom tapped the shoulder of the coxswain. "Well done." Johnny had finally realized that they were safe and sat up, grinning foolishly at Tom. Between Tom and Snakes, they managed to get him into a rear accommodation of the ship where the rest of the reckies were anxiously waiting. And after a quick shower, Tom sat down with the UNITA rebel. It was going to be a long night, but it had to be done. They needed all the information to formulate a final plan. At the Kwanzaa base, the only sound was the running of the big Caterpillar power generator. But it was not the sound of the generator that was keeping Leslie Ann awake, it was despair. She had tried to sleep, tried to clear her mind, but the fear kept on coming back with a rush of emotions. It was too much uncertainty, too much fear about her life and future. Fear that she was forgotten in this prison, her fate beyond control, beyond salvage, and that she would grow old without children. Never to marry, never to bear children, her future non-existent in the desolation that she felt. Her time in prison seemed to stand still, day after day, month after month, and oh no, how many years? How long would she have to be there? And would she have to wait it out? And her despair was overwhelming. She wanted to crush her. It wanted to crush her, broke her soul, and mentally cracked her. There was no sign, absolutely no indication for an end of her ordeal. Would she ever see her parents again? And Tom? She threw the single blanket off and furiously paced the floor to and from the door. And finally, she stopped in front of the single window. She grabbed the thick crossbars and stared out over the faintly lighted area in front of the cell. The yellowish wall of the short hallway was totally depressing. Her cell was the last in a row of 5 cells in the block. The thick steel door was locked at night, as well as the outer door to the block. And then there was the fence and the guards. If only she could get away, down to the river perhaps, rather being eaten by the crocodiles than staying in this place, or get shot as she ran towards the river. The river, it was 300 meters away, but at least there were some bushes. Cover, it was called. Some larger shrubs had grown up against the outside fence on the riverside. That was where she should go through. But how on earth would she get out through the doors? And during daytime there was always an armed guard following her around. If only she could get past him, maybe inject him with something deadly. And immediately she was shocked at her thoughts, shocked that she could even contemplate it. And she remembered clearly the day she had signed the Hippocratic Oath at the University of Stellenbosch. She and all her classmates declared their dedication to saving lives, not destroying it. But the war brought so much confusion and uncertainty between what was right and what was wrong. There were only 2 women from their class who joined the defense force, she and Jessie Stein. Most of their male counterparts were obliged to do national service. And she ended up being abducted by the most notorious terrorist of all time. And now she languished away in a SWAPO rehabilitation center. And the tears started rolling down her cheeks again. If only. If only Tom could come to her, somehow. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his subconscious mind. It was the 6th sense that had kept him alive over the years, which made him an exceptional soldier. The inner feeling had never failed him, and it was keeping him awake. Timothy Shikongu stood under the tree behind the house he shared with Gina Maldonado, the uneasiness overwhelming. His eyes roamed over the base and adjacent rehabilitation center. He saw one of the security lights was out, casting darkness on a patch of the fence. In 2 days' time, he would accompany his prisoner to the exchange for which he had worked so hard, risked the lives of his men, and now it was becoming a reality. For the freedom of General Gaviscon Bomba, the highly respected member of SWAPO and once a fierce fighter in the ranks of Plan. Once General Bomba had been debriefed, he and a few of his men who would accompany the general to Kasinga to extract the lost diamonds. He had sent a warning to Matthias to be prepared and to await his arrival in a few days, definitely not weeks. It had to be there. The conversation with Mabu and Mutongu had confirmed it, and he fervently hoped that General Bomba would live up to everyone's expectations. SWAPO needed the diamonds. His personal sacrifices and hardship would be insignificant against the success of finding the diamonds. He had Lieutenant Roberts as his prisoner, and the knowledge that she was in a way attached to his arch enemy. The thought crossed his mind to use her to draw out Tango Mike. But the wishes of his organization were more important than his own retribution. But then, on the other hand, The elation he had experienced when he learned about her and Tanga Mike was quite foreign to his normal mindset. Instead of being angry or elated at his good fortune, he had just experienced a mixed feeling of satisfaction and respect. Mooi aand verder. Dankie dat jy like, subscribe, share en die belbutton druk. Ja, die voeltjies gesels lekker saam. Beide die voeltjies in die tuin as ook ons twee budgies. Ek hoop nie dit het te veel geplan nie. Mooi aand.